morning, everybody. I'm extremely glad that all of you all could make it here this morning. Um, Let me get out of the slide. Okay. Um, Before I get started, I would like to ask a few questions so I can understand my audience better. How many of you all work in the incident response domain within security? Okay, that's a good number. And how many of you all have a response plan or a playbook in your team? Oh, that's a good number too. I haven't seen so many people before. So you guys have made my job easier. So that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about what an incident response playbook is. And this is going to be our agenda for today. We're going to start right from the basic, which is what is a security incident, and you will understand why I start with this once we go into the presentation. And then we're going to see what an incident response plan or what an incident response process is, followed by what a playbook is and how to build one, and finally your action items, that is things you have to do once you walk out of the stock. Who am I? I am Yaamini Barathi Mohan, and I work for Dell Technologies as a vulnerability responder, STL engineer / software engineer, and so on. And how I got into cybersecurity was I have a background in a bachelor's in information technology, and then I got the opportunity to do my master's in cybersecurity from Johns Hopkins. And then during my master's, I got to do an internship with RSA Security, which was then part of Dell Technologies, and then I got a full-time job. That's how I got into cybersecurity, and there's been no turning back since then. And so that's my 9 to 5. I work for Dell 9 to 5. And apart from that, in my spare time, I volunteer a lot with the cybersecurity communities, like Women in Cybersecurity, Secure Diversity, and so on. I help them conduct security events, and I myself participate in conferences like this and give presentations. And that's a QR code to my LinkedIn account. I hope to connect with a lot of you guys today. And let's get started. So the reason I have this what a security incident is slide to start with is because I see this happen a lot in my day-to-day job. I feel like the IT industry believes that since we are into fixing things, since we are into bridging gaps, we are being pushed with any sort of fix, whether it's security or not. And since we can all agree that we have very limited security resources around the globe, I believe we need to use the resources that we have vehemently for just security issues. So when you are, as a responder, when you're being provided with an incident, I think it's extremely important that you make sure it's a security incident before you start working on it. And how we do that is by using these terms to define it. If it's an incident that has the potential to jeopardize the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of resources, of your product, of your business on the whole, then that's a security incident, and that's something that you need to be spending time on. So now when you know that you have a security incident at hand, it's extremely important to meticulously handle this, and that's where your response plan comes into place. Now, each incident is unique in its own way. So should your response plan be. We cannot use the same response plan for all sorts of incidents. So it's extremely important that we draft out a unique plan for each type. Though these response plans are going to be unique for each incident, on the whole, all the response plans would have a similar structure. That is, they would follow these main 5 stages of 5 steps, which are detect, analyze, contain, eradicate, and recover. We will look at these more in detail as we go into the presentation. But teams in organizations, teams that usually perform the response process are coined as CERT, PCERT, CCERT, vulnerability management, and overlap with SOC in certain organizations depending on the size and purpose of the organization. We are called PCERT at Dell. So yeah. Okay, framework. Now you remember the 5 steps that I spoke about in a response plan in the previous slide. There are organizations out there that provide you frameworks so you can build your own response plan. And out of all those, my favorite is NIST, because I feel like each step has been very well defined by NIST, which becomes extremely easy when you have to collaborate with other members within the team or other teams even, since it's very well defined. Now let's look at each stage of the framework and what it means. So the very first one is identify. Now how NIST wants you to start building your plan is, every team is going to have a set of commonly faced incidents, a set of commonly faced attacks, and you can start off by building a plan for these, and then you can move on to addressing your more unique incidents. So that's where you start. You start by doing your research and finding what your common incidents are. So now that you have that noted down, the next stage is protect. And by protect, what they mean is to kind of gather all the tools and resources that you're going to be using throughout your process, throughout the process of providing, determining your impact, determining your remediation, all the resources that you're going to be using throughout the process. That's what you do in the protect step. The next one is detect. Now you can see detect from any, it depends on your perspective, I would say. You can take this step as tools again, tools you use to detect an incident when it occurs, or different methods that your organization uses to detect the incident. For instance, it could be the pen testing team, or it could be one of your guys, your security guys, when you run your regular scans. So you can note that down in your plan, and it would give more depth and value to your response plan. The fourth step is respond, which is the key of the entire incident response plan. Now, how you respond to one particular incident, all your steps, is what goes into this stage of the framework. For instance, say you're dealing with a third-party vulnerability, and then your steps are going to be, you're going to have to go into their security advisory, find out when they're going to post their fix, and find out when you guys are going to take on that fix. Those are going to be your steps, and you need to note that down in your response plan. And the last step is recover, which is the most commonly overlooked step, because once people are done responding, we are done. We are done with our job. We are done responding. But no, we need to review what we have done. We need to go back to the plan that we just drafted, see where we have made a mistake. I'm pretty sure we're going to make a mistake somewhere. So make sure that you note down your mistake and review your document along with your team, and improvise your plan, basically. So these are the 5 basic steps to build your response plan. Okay. So I want to talk about the importance of having a response plan, because I'm going to convince all of you that you need to have a response plan. And I thought, what better way to do that than numbers? So this is a study that was done by IBM in the year 2022. And what they've taken a bunch of companies that apparently did not have a response plan in their organization. And this is how much on an average they had to spend to recover from each of these listed incidents. So the companies on an average had to spend like close to $5 million to recover from phishing, which is the most, which makes sense, that's the most common incident. The next is business email. The third is vulnerability in third party, which is surprising to me because that's what we most commonly face. And I thought that's what everybody commonly faced. Stolen credentials and then malicious insider. Now, according to their prediction, according to IBM's prediction, they said had these organizations implemented a response plan in their team, they could have cut down these costs by 50%. So now, they could have spent just $2.5 million to recover from phishing attack instead of $5 million, which does not seem like a bad deal to me. If you can save $2.5 million with just a response plan, I would vouch for it. Okay. In addition to saving tons and tons of money, there are a few other benefits to having a response plan. And these are the 4 key benefits, I would say, from my perspective. The first one is, since you know what you're going to be doing, since you know where all your resources are, where all your contacts are, all put in one place, you're going to be able to respond to these incidents quicker. That's number 1, prompt response. Since you're going to be responding to it quicker, you're going to be able to contain the incident at an earlier stage, which is going to lead to minimizing your damages. When you minimize your damages, it is in turn going to lead to a steady flow of business. There's not going to be an interruption in your business. And when your customers see that there is a business continuity, they're going to want to do business more with you. When they see that you have a robust incident response plan, you're going to gain your customer trust, which is the 4th benefit. Now, let's start talking about a playbook, which is kind of like the heart of the talk. What is a response playbook? Now, we spoke about what a response plan is. And like I told you, each plan is unique in its own way. A playbook, in layman terms, is just a collection of these different types of response plans. All put together in one place is your playbook. Standardized framework, yes. That is my favorite quality about having a playbook. Now, assume you're working on a larger product with like multiple components. Say you're hit with an incident and you need to collaborate across teams with these various other response teams of these various components. You're going to be spending a good amount of time trying to set a standard of how you guys are going to work. In the same time, if you have a standardized playbook that has already been established, that could be achieved in one call, and you can directly get to the business of responding to the incident. This is one point that I have found to be most useful. The next one is steps to follow and roles and responsibilities, which we'll look more as we get into the example. Okay, now that I've told you what a playbook is, I want to talk about the importance of a playbook. And since I'm a kid at heart, and I love playing games, I have a very simple game planned out here. It's very simple. Please play along with me. So as the game goes is, I have a bunch of colors here, and I have a way I expect you to respond to these colors as I call them out. So when I say red, I expect you to raise your right hand. When I say yellow, your left. And when I say green, both your hands. Okay, it's very simple. Okay, let's get started. Right, green, yellow, yellow, red, green, red. Okay. Okay, since you guys are really good at this game, let's move on to level 2. I'm just joking. I'm not going to make you do that. So this is something that I was shown when I got into this entire business of Playbook. And this is the image that I have in my mind. That's why I have it here. This is what I want you guys to remember when you walk out. Think of each of these colors as an incident, and the way I expect you to respond to these as your response plan. And so in the literal sense, this is how your playbook should look. It's a combination of all your incidents and all your response plans. Okay, now hopefully that I've convinced you guys that it's important. Let's move on to the details of it, how to build a playbook. The way I've structured this is I've used the steps that we saw in the NIST framework, and I have sectioned the flow of the process with each step from the NIST framework. And I've used a flow chart here because I'm a visual person and I think that works best for me. You can use paragraphs or bullets or table depending on what works best for your team. So assume that your playbook opens up to this, your most commonly faced incidents. Here I've hypothetically taken phishing, DDoS, third-party component, and proprietary code as the most commonly faced incidents. And I'm going to follow along with the proprietary code example. This is the next stage, which is incident detection and assessment. The reason I've taken proprietary code as an example is because I feel this has a few more elements in the process, and that would end up being a more wholesome example for this. So say you've been pinged saying that we found a proprietary code vulnerability, and we need to deal with this now. So the way you start is you want to make sure how this vulnerability was found, how this was assessed how this was detected in the first place, and you can list out the ways this was detected in your playbook, whether it was found through a customer, whether it was through pen testing, whether it was through one of your engineering guys when they were testing it. So you can note that down in your playbook so you don't miss out on any of the options. Most of the time when you go back to the roots of finding how a vulnerability was reported, you're going to be stuck with a scan report, and you need to validate your scan report, and this is where the making sure it's a security incident slide comes in. You want to make sure that it's worth your time, and if it is, then you move on to, if it is yes, if it's a security incident and you need to fix it, you move on to yes, which is you need to prepare your impact statement and provide them with the plan. But before we move on to yes, I want to talk about the no part, because I've noticed in most cases that the way people perform if it is a yes is different from how they perform if it is a no. But it's extremely important to document that as well. So say it's a no, it's not a security incident, and you do not have to respond to it. It's important for you to make sure that you communicate it through predefined communication channels. It could be through Teams message, it could be through an email, or it could be a Jira ticket that you're dealing with, and your comment section could be how you communicate with your team. You need to define this with your team ahead of time, and you document that in your playbook. So your communication channel, and also a template to get out this message as to why this is not a vulnerability, or why you're not remediating this. So yes, two things to add to your playbook, which is communication channel, who communicates this to whom, and your template. Say it's a yes. If it's a yes, then you move on to the more heavier side of it, which is you need to prepare an impact statement. To prepare your impact statement, you're going to have to analyze it, for which you need tools. You can link your tools to your playbook, and similar to what we saw earlier, you link your template for your impact statement and your communication channels through what you're going to communicate it, and your source and destination of communication. Who communicates this to whom? Following the impact statement, it's going to be your remediation plan, which is the same from a playbook's perspective. You're going to have to add the same elements: your tools, your template, your communication channels, and your source and destination for your communication. Okay. The next one is recovery and remediation, which is kind of like the fourth and the fifth step of the NIST. I've put it together so it doesn't interrupt the flow. Now, this is what I spoke about when I said I'm picking proprietary code as an example. Now, a proprietary code vulnerability is something that has been found in a code that was built by your team. So most of the time, it's going to require a code change. And in that case, if it requires a code change, you're going to have to communicate with either the lead architect of the component that requires the code change, or your lead engineer. And it becomes beneficial if you can list that down in your playbook. You can have a table that lists the different components within your product and the lead architect of each of it to whom you can communicate. Once you reach out to them, you're going to be able to draft your remediation plan using your template that we saw in the previous slide. And communicate. Once your plan has been drafted, you can communicate it again using the elements that we spoke in the previous slide about. When it's a proprietary code and when it requires a code change, you are going to have, most of the time, it's going to, not most of the time, sometimes it's going to have to, it's going to take a longer time, which might result in you not being able to meet the remedy due date. And in that case, you're going to have to get an exception request. Now, the exception request is a process on its own. Depending on the complexity of your team, you can either have a separate document for this and link that to your playbook, or if you can make it brief enough, you can add it right here. The way this goes is you're going to have a statement mentioning why you're not going to be able to meet the remedy due date, and you're going to have to get it approved from your lead, your leads manager, depending on the structure of your team. And once that's done, you're going to have to document your approved exception along with the issue that you're working on, the incident that you're working on, for future references. Now, this ends the process of remediating a proprietary code vulnerability, but I wanted to, this is not an exact step, but I wanted to stress on this part, so I have it as a separate slide. Roles and responsibilities. I feel like this helps reducing ambiguity when you're working with the team. And the way I like doing this is you have the work that needs to be done, and you can have your designation of who needs to do this right next to it. So everybody knows in which stage of the process they're supposed to do what. It just allows easier flow of the team working together. So yes, let me just quickly summarize all the elements that you need to keep in mind when you're building your playbook. Number one are your tools and templates, everything that you need to include. The roles and responsibilities, what we just spoke about, who all your team members and what functions they perform at what stage of the process. Your communication and notification, how you're going to communicate your channel of communication and who communicates it to whom. And finally, documentation. You document everything. That's the key for incident response, I would say. You document anything and everything. Another new feature that I recently found out was you can document the process of how this playbook is going to be reviewed from time to time, who maintains the playbook, and how often you guys review this, how often you update your playbook. That can be documented as a part of your playbook as well. And that brings us to the end. So these are your action items. If you do not have a dedicated IR team, I would highly recommend that you start building one. It could be a one-man team, and you start from there, and you can build with that. And if you do have a team and you don't have a response plan, I would suggest you start looking up your most commonly occurring attacks and create response plans for those. If you already have a bunch of plans, please put them together and create your own playbook. And once you have your playbook, hopefully you would just have one incident, which is your red color, and the only way you need to respond to it is go to your incident response playbook. And that is it. Thank you so much, guys. You guys have been very cooperative. Any questions, please? Yeah.
My experience has been that you can develop all the playbooks in the world, but if you don't have a check on it, a quality assurance portion to it. For example, in our organization at one time, well, we still are, or were, I retired, but we became an ISO 9000 certified white-collar organization, so we actually brought in an independent people to take a look at what we do. How do you address that? I mean, you've shown the playbook, but now how do you really ensure that its quality and its completeness is there and looked at from an independent set of eyes?
I get it. So that's what I talk about when that's what I mean when I talk about reviewing your playbook from time to time. You can start off by, I understand it's not a reasonable ask to review this after every incident, but you can start from like twice a year, once in 6 months, once in a quarter, and then you keep improvising on your timeline, and you review this from time to time along with your team, and you update your playbook. Any other questions?
So you talked a little bit about a communication plan. Can you speak a little bit on some best practices on out-of-band communication? Say your organization is compromised or your internal communication systems are down. What are the best practices on making sure that you're effective and maybe not giving information to somebody that's compromised your infrastructure and can maybe read information to how would you go about reducing some of that and making sure that communication is still occurring?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the entire question. Are you saying how can I communicate this outside the organization?
No, internally, what best practices do you recommend as far as developing a external communication stream so that your organization can communicate even when you're compromised?
Yeah, I would what I would suggest is having it all ticketed. You have these tickets in your system, so you can review them even after you've closed down these incidents. You go back to these, and when I spoke about having your impact statement and remediation communicated, when you have tickets, it's easier to document it there. You can have it in your comment section, and even your exception request, you can have it all there. And yeah, I would suggest having Jira tickets, for example, would be the easiest way to do that.
Let's give a round of applause. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Yaamini.
Thank you.